really can transform this upside-down taxation system in the state of Alabama, where the wealthy pay so little and the working class pays so much.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Alabama legislators are legislating all over us, but it's it's not as bad as it could have been. A lot of stuff today. Not as is the that's kind
bad,
of
but not as awful as it could have been.
That's like a theme of the show today. Bad, but not the worst. So and there are actually a couple of not just bad but good things that passed, and one of those is the driver's license bill that we have kind of been following a little bit over the last couple of years, that makes it so that your driver's license cannot be suspended just for lack of payment of fees. And that's very important because that has not been the case for a while. And so there have been thousands of Alabamians who have had their license taken away from them, not because of any dangerous driving, not because they were drunk behind the wheel, not because of any of that, just because they hadn't given $100 to the court or something like that, which is absolutely crazy, unjustifiable, particularly when you think about, okay, so if they owe you $100 or $200 or $1,000, how exactly do you expect them to pay you back if they don't have a car in Alabama? It's not like we live in, D.C. or New York or Boston, where there is a semi-reliable public transportation. If you live in Alabama, you have to have a car. Almost, all of us. There maybe be like 1% of people who live in the state who actually don't need a car. But 99% of us who have to work have to have a car. And if you're not able to use it, or you're not able to use it legally, you're not going to be able to make money. And then your debt is just going to increase and increase and increase.
And inevitably what happens is, of course, they risk it. They drive without the license, then they get pulled over. Now all of a sudden they're getting arrested, or they've got additional criminal charges. It's just a really vicious cycle. I do want to say that there was some good news coming out of the Alabama legislature. For all the bad news, and there's plenty of it, believe me, you can go back and listen to pretty much anything we've been talking about all spring. But this is a good bill. SB 154, it was sponsored by Will Barfoot, who is a Republican out of Pike Road, right outside Montgomery. And so basically, individuals will now be allowed to miss one court appearance or 2 payments on their fines and fees before their licenses can be suspended. And courts can currently suspend license for the very first missed payment. So this law will take effect on October 1st. This was a significant victory for criminal justice reform groups who have made this a real, focus this year and in previous years. In particular, I want to highlight Alabama Appleseed. Alabama Appleseed Center for Law and Justice has been really on top of this bill. They've been pushing this very, very hard. They almost got it through last year, and it fell just short at the very last minute. So they worked to get this bill across the finish line, and it's going to provide relief to thousands of low-income, working-class people in this state. So shout out to Alabama Appleseed, and credit to these legislators for, being willing to actually hear out logic and reason and have some degree of empathy, perhaps even, shocking that. I know that's pretty shocking to think that legislators could have empathy, but evidently some of them had enough common sense to pass this bill. It is less than what advocates originally sought. They wanted to make sure that people could keep their licenses if they made most of their payments for the year, and if they missed one court appearance or whatever, and it would have made it easier to have it reinstated. But there were multiple amendments to the bill to get it through, so of course it got watered down. But again, this is going to reduce the number of suspensions of people's driver's licenses over missed court dates and failure to pay fines. So I think it's really a great little chip of progress there. So that was good news. The other, I guess you could say, fairly good news would be there are 2 tax cuts coming for working people that we've discussed on the show. One of which, the Anthony Daniels overtime tax cut, which was supported by, a pretty broad group of folks, labor and business really supported it. And, like we've said on the show, it's a fine bill. I'll happily take a tax cut on my overtime pay. As Brother Joe Marshall pointed out, though, in a roundabout way, it's sort of incentivizing people. It's incentivizing the use of overtime, which isn't necessarily a pro-worker position, right? Because the pro-worker position is that you should be able to work a normal full week and make enough to survive and thrive, and you shouldn't have to get over 40 hours a week. And if people are regularly working over 40 hours a week, you probably need to hire more help. And so, create more jobs. So I'm sensitive to those arguments. I'm also sensitive to the argument that none of this revenue is being replaced. And so...
Well, they did right before they passed it. Did you see the amendment that they added to it? They capped the benefit at... they capped the exemption at $2,000 a year. Which is not capping the benefit at $2,000 a year. That is capping the income that is exempt to $2,000 a year, which is not a whole lot. And that effectively limits the annual benefit to $100.
Really? I didn't realize it had been whittled down to that.
Yeah. So that is actually what passed yesterday. It is now on Governor Ivey's desk for signature. All indications are that she is going to sign it. But yeah, that is a pretty weird thing to say is that only $2,000 of your overtime pay is tax exempt. But
really, that's interesting.
But you did mention that about it incentivizing overtime pay, and I saw that on the Alabama Political Reporter, and they're reporting on it, and they said that they heard from unions that it will, quote, incentivize the state's hardest workers, and I hope that was maybe a misinterpretation of what they heard from the unions, because I totally agree that we should absolutely not be incentivizing people to work more overtime. We should be incentivizing companies to pay people adequately in 40 hours and create more jobs. And we should be working to create ways for employees to have more freedom from work, not not creating more ways for them to try to stay. David, friend of the show, co-founder, did push back a little bit, saying that, this benefit isn't enough to actually incentivize. And I probably agree with that, especially with this cap.
Right.
Nobody is going to work overtime for $100, a max of $100 a year, right? Nobody's going to work overtime to get that. It's just going to be a nice little bonus for people who work a lot, who work too much, frankly. Yeah. I agree with that, but definitely don't want to be creating those kinds of incentives.
Yeah, and it's so it's very mild. It's very mild. It doesn't do a whole lot. It's got pros and cons, and it's hard to feel super strongly about any of it, frankly.
Yeah.
And so, this is the groundbreaking bill, that's coming out of the legislature. It just seems kind of paltry compared to the great needs of working people in Alabama. We have such needs here. We rank at or near the bottom on every aspect of our quality of life. Our people are too poor. Our people are working too hard for too little wages. We have starvation wages in this state. We have corporate handouts in this state. And, so I'm not going to be super thrilled. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take it for what it is. And now, on a related note, the grocery tax cut is finally happening after like literal decades of pushing
Right.
for this.
Yeah.
So, I give a lot of credit to Alabama Arise for this because they have been one of the, champions of this bill. It's not a full repeal right away like a lot of folks wanted. It's phased in. It's got some caps and protections there. So it did try to address some of the concerns about, the education trust fund budget, because ultimately grocery taxes, fund schools. So there were some, some provisions, some changes there. So it's not going to be an immediate tax cut, which also means, it's not something you're going to notice right away or even in a big way necessarily. But I agree with what Alabama Rise Executive Director Robin Hayden said, that it's a step in the right direction for our upside down tax system.
Yeah, and and like the overtime tax cut, this is this is a very measured thing. It's not a complete elimination of the grocery tax. It's not even a complete elimination of the state's portion of the grocery tax, which is 4%. It is a gradual elimination of half of the state's grocery tax that does not go into effect if revenue into the Education Trust Fund falls below an annual growth of like 3%. Right. So this is it's a very like Democrat type of proposal, right? The thing about like, what was it? Kamala's student debt forgiveness plan when she was running for president was something like, if you
jump through 3 hurdles and check 4 boxes,
if
you might qualify.
If you are from an underprivileged community and you have more than $20,000 in student debt and you work for 5 years in a rural area with, it's
you
just
got to read
all
a damn
sorts of
essay
stuff.
to figure out if you qualify.
Right. I mean, this is very much kind of in that vein. It's like, a 2% tax cut over 4 years if the Education Trust Fund continues to grow at 3% per year.
Right.
And if it doesn't grow in 3% in 1 year, then that 0.5% tax cut for that year is stalled. So, it's just very, very,
Yeah, and I'll say this, it's no secret, I'm pretty radical and militant with my politics, but I also am someone who is capable of compromise and recognizes that you can't let, you can't abandon something decent just for the sake of perfection. And so I get that the grocery tax cut is not ideal, but it's getting passed. And so that is progress. And it is long past time to end regressive taxes in this state on people's food, people's groceries. So I think it's a step in the right direction. What I've always rejected is this idea that, well, you can get some modest tax relief or you can fund your schools, right? You have to pick between the two. And, we'll see what kind of impact this has on education funding, and we'll see these two maybe aren't super alarming by themselves, but then you factor in the rebates that are being given. You factor in, tens of millions in tax cuts that were passed last year that are, we're just now starting to see the impacts of. And it will add up, and the economy will crash. The education budget has been, in really good shape comparatively, because of rising sales tax revenues and through, one-time federal infusions. And so that's not guaranteed to last. The feds aren't going to be giving us any more money like that, and certainly not anytime soon. And, record collections of sales taxes probably isn't going to continue indefinitely, would be my guess. So all that to say, there were a couple of good things to happen in the Alabama legislature, and I credit the hard work of activists and organizers who really are persistent, because, and I heard this from Dana with Alabama Appleseed. He was asked, what do you credit this success for with his driver's license bill? And he said persistence. We just wouldn't let it go. We kept trying, and when one line of argument didn't work, we tried a different line of argument. When we would just go legislator by legislator, district by district, and chip away at it. So I give a lot of credit to the activists and the organizations that have fought hard to make this, what we admit is incremental progress, but we'll take it. And I hope that it starts conversations moving forward about how we really can transform this upside-down taxation system in the state of Alabama, where, the wealthy pay so little and the working class pays so much. I think we can change that. We can do better in this state, and I hope that, this gets us a little bit closer down the road to that.
Yep. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.